There are so many numbers you'll pay attention to when looking at money from your business, all those business financial numbers. But today I want to talk about two numbers specifically that I want to encourage you to pay attention to. And I'll be sharing about how these numbers I missed watching for a while. Like I was the person not paying attention to it. And I wish I had sooner. And I want you to be able to avoid my mistake. And I want to go ahead and put it out there. No, the numbers I'm talking about are not revenue and profit. It's something else. So get excited. This is going to be a fun episode. Let's dive in. Hey guys, it's Elizabeth McCravy, and you're listening to the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. Each week, I'll bring you workshop-style trainings that teach you how to stand out online, design success from the inside out, and create a breakthrough business. It's time to turn viewers into raving fans and design the business and life of your dreams. I'm so excited you're here. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth McCravy, and before we get into the super fun topic today, I'm so excited about this one, you guys. I've actually been working on the outline here for quite a bit of time. It's been like an idea that I've been sitting with and thinking about, like, how do I best want to explain all this? And then this morning, I'm recording this at 9:20 a.m. on a Monday. I was like, I got it all ready. I'm excited to record this one. But before I do, I want to give a little life update. So if you're a regular listener of this podcast, thank you, by the way, but you probably noticed I used to do a lot of little life updates and I've quit doing that as much. So I wanted to kind of do that here for a second. So I have two things I want to share. First one, this is exciting. This is the place I'm saying it first, but Adam and I are getting into the rental property business. And we're in the early stages. I've kind of mentioned this a couple of times on Instagram stories, but I don't have much to say about it yet, except we're in the early stages. We're very much learning and figuring out like what our best next steps are. But we are like starting to house shop, more like location shop is a better way to put it. We're starting to look into like what's the best thing for us. And we're planning to get 1 to 2 properties, possibly 2, possibly spending more and only getting 1. We will see. And originally we were thinking about Airbnbs because that's so fun, right? I've like seriously for years thought like running an Airbnb sounds really fun. I know a lot of work, but also fun. But with COVID this year, that has felt like not the right move and definitely not for forever. I still think I want to do an Airbnb at some point, but with COVID and with this also being our first time doing rental business, I think starting with a simpler solution of like a long-term tenant is better than starting as a vacation property. So we still want to do vacation rentals at some point and maybe we'll change our mind. But right now we're looking at buying a property like a house or condo or something like that that we can rent out to people who want to stay in it for like, a year or however long. And yeah, so that's something we're starting on. And as I have more info, I will be sure to do a podcast, like once we actually get moving and tell you guys what we're learning and all that. Cause I know some of you have messaged me saying, like when I shared this on Instagram briefly, that that's a dream of yours too, to be able to do rental properties. And so hopefully some of what I learn, cause I'm certainly not an expert, but as we learn, I know I'll get new knowledge that I can pass on to you guys. And a fun thing too, we aren't sure yet what city we'll buy in. That's why I said we're kind of more location shopping right now than actually house shopping, but we likely aren't going to be buying in Nashville for various reasons, because Nashville's where we live for reference. If you didn't know that, but we live in Nashville and have for 5 years. So if we don't buy in Nashville, though, it'll likely be somewhere driving distance to here. That's our current thought right now. So anyway, more to come on that. Exciting stuff. That has been seriously a goal of ours, of vacation rentals or rental properties in general, to have a few of those before we're 30. So we're on track for that now. So next update. This one's going to sound a little bit more vague, but I am learning so much this year about resting, taking it easy, saying no, and all of the things this year. And this has been such a process for me. And I've mentioned this once, I believe, only once on the podcast. But if you follow me online on Instagram, again, if you don't follow me on Instagram, we should be friends over there. I'm at Elizabeth McCravy. I'll link to that in the show notes. But if you follow me online or have listened to the visualization episode I did a few back on this podcast, I mentioned how my dad passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack over Father's Day weekend. And so at the time of this recording, it was actually 3 months exactly, just a few days ago of when it happened. I'll forever notice when the each month mark is of it. But when that first happened over that weekend, I was seriously barely existing half the time is what it felt like when everything was happening. I was in a trance of 1,000 to-do list items, while also grieving a lot. And for reference, when it comes to the to-do list thing, because some of you might be like, why did you have so much to do from your dad passing away? But my parents are divorced, and they got divorced when I was 6 years old. My dad was not remarried, and I'm his oldest daughter. And he lived alone. He ran a business that was super awesome. And so as his oldest daughter, though, everything in general kind of fell on me and my sister and Adam to handle. So my dad, I have one sister, Suzanne. And so both of us, plus Adam, were kind of managing all this stuff without any a bigger adult with us helping. My uncle and family members helped a lot, but I was am the executor of the estate. And so it's a lot of work, and there's still a lot we're doing for it, but it was really hard in the moment of I'm over here grieving, but then also getting phone calls about this thing I have to do for moving him out of his house and this business thing. And it was a lot, and it's definitely slowed down some. But one thing I realized about myself this year is that I am bad about overcommitting myself. And I used to think I was someone who was not, but I think in this season particularly, I've been bad about it, and sometimes not realizing I'd overcommitted until the time comes. And then I'm like, wait, I can't do all this. This is too much for me emotionally right now. And again, the grieving comes in waves. And that's why it might seem like I've been running my business normally. It's because 1, Instagram is not reality. And 2, it really does come in waves. So I've been trying to have more grace for myself and the struggles of the season, going slower, taking time to grieve and be with the Lord more. And I will say I have felt an inner peace around losing my dad. Really, this whole process, I felt an inner peace. Even though I've been grieving for me, I haven't been grieving for him, because I know he's with the Lord without a doubt. My dad was a super strong believer and had an amazing faith I really admired. But so I'm not grieving as much for him, because it's amazing. He's in heaven right now. So I'm grieving for me, and the people who loved him here still without him, if that makes sense. So because of that, though, I've been able to have an inner peace around losing him, but it's still super, super hard. So some of you have asked how I've been with all that. So there's a little life update there. And then a more upbeat one about the rental property stuff. So I'll be sure to update you on that as more info comes. So also, if you enjoyed the little life update stuff, I do want to say, if you scroll back about 2 episodes, I did an entire week in the life episode. It's really long, but a lot of cool stuff in there of behind the scenes of both my business and personal life. So that interests you and you did not listen to that one, definitely go back and listen to it. I think it's a really, really fun one. Okay, so now into today's topic. So like I said, I've been working on this concept for a while, and I'm really excited to bring it to you this morning. So to kind of kick this off, the financial numbers to pay attention to. And like I said in the intro, I'm not talking about revenue and profits. Those are givens to me that you should know. But I'm going to talk about 2 other numbers that relate to that, but are a little more specific. So 2 things to clarify before we get started here. I'm not a bookkeeper, an accountant, a financial advisor, anything like that. These ideas are my own. This is what has worked for me and my business. So if you need really specific financial advice, go to someone who is specialized in that. And another thing I want to say as well is that I'm looking at this from the perspective of an online business owner that does not carry product, physical product, but instead is doing services or digital products, like what I do with website templates and services like branding and website design. So I know that not all businesses are going to be the same in this way, but that's who I'm speaking to here today. So here we go. Claire Pells from the Get Paid podcast is the person I want to credit with getting me thinking about this. If you do not listen to her podcast, 1, you absolutely should. I get asked all the time, well, Elizabeth, what podcasts do you listen to? That's what I really love. I have not listened to every episode, but I've listened to a ton of them. And it's one of my favorite podcasts. She is also one of my favorite interviewers. She interviews people about how they make money online, and she's really great at asking hard, uncomfortable questions that are really good and really pulling the juice of someone's business out of the person being interviewed. And she also does solo episodes in addition to her interviews. And so she did an episode where I believe the title was something to the extent of why I'm no longer only paying attention to revenue or something of that nature, like why revenue isn't the only thing I'm paying attention to in my business. And it was really interesting, right? I'm like, okay, revenue, we all in the online business space are always talking about, 6 figures revenue, 7 figures, 100K a year, whatever. And so her thoughts on that inspired me a lot and made me kind of look at my business a bit differently. So I want to give her credit here for kind of like inspiring this idea and encourage you to listen to that episode. I'll link to it in the show notes. And also just her show in general after you listen to this one. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you the numbers I'm going to be talking about here instead of like keeping it a secret this whole time. But then we're going to dive into each. And I have some additional tips at the end around business finances. So the two numbers, the first one, how much you actually pay yourself. That's the first one we're going to talk about. The second one is how much is left as profits in the business, which we'll call retained earnings, like savings, future investing, basically not tax money, but like money that actually belongs to the business. So there you go. Those are the two numbers. So let's dive into it. So the first number, how much you pay yourself as the CEO of your business. So interesting thing. Again, I said these are numbers I didn't pay attention to well for a long time. That's very true of this one. So this year for my business, though, to give some context, has been really huge. I'm so grateful. But I know that's not been everyone's story in 2020, but I really am grateful. My business has had a big growth year, and crazy thing, I've almost tripled. I looked at it earlier when I was outlining this, but I've almost tripled from 2019 revenue. And it's only September this year. So looking at just January through September 20th, I've almost tripled the revenue from what it was the entire year of 2019. So pretty fun, pretty amazing, exciting growth. So I'm a bit ashamed though, as I share that growth, to say until about, I want to say like 3 to 4 months ago, it might even be more recent than that. It's really whenever I started thinking about this episode. I had only been really paying attention to my revenue and profits. And I am proud to say though, that at basically any given time in my business, I'm able to like share finance numbers. Not that I'm sharing them with people all the time, but I know my own numbers. So at any given time, I would know what my revenue is, then how much I'm spending that month, generally speaking, and then what's going to be left over, right? So the revenue, the expenditures, and then the profit. I could easily know those. And that's something too, if you guys don't know those numbers, I'm going to talk about this more at the end, but please know those numbers too. It's so important for you to know what's happening financially in your business. So anyway, I'll say that rant for later, but something you'll find as you start to scale your business, and some of you guys are already here and some of you guys are headed here, but you'll end up leaving money in your business for things like an emergency fund for the business, saving for money to invest back into your business, or literally just money that you're like, I'm going to figure out what to do with this later. Maybe it's a quarterly bonus. Maybe it's a like, you don't even know what you're going to spend it on later, but you don't need to pay it to yourself. So basically, as you scale, you don't pay yourself every penny. And maybe you're, not at that scaling point yet, and you still don't pay yourself every penny. And that's amazing. But for me, with my story, and I think the way I did it worked fine. But for, maybe a year or two early in my business, I was paying myself every penny I made. I kept about $500 extra in my business that I built up from just like 1 month of like not paying myself $500 basically. And I kept that in there as like floating money. But then at the end of the month, everything that was left over was scooped as a paycheck to me. And what I paid myself varied a lot based on what I made that month because my income still is pretty inconsistent. What I pay myself isn't, but the revenue, I should say, the revenue and profits is still pretty inconsistent in my business. It varies a lot depending on so many factors. Like a launch month is going to be bigger than just an everyday month. But anyway, I was paying myself everything, and I think that worked great for that season. I did not have a team. I didn't run Facebook ads. I didn't have many operating costs. Now I feel like an emergency fund that's bigger is more essential because it's scaling with my business. But back then it made sense to me. So if that's you right now, and you're paying yourself everything, that's fine. There does become a point, which we're going to talk about, but where you want to start keeping more in the money. It's more money in the business, but at some point that doesn't always make sense. So anyway, though, I was looking at an old financial spreadsheet because I always have had finance spreadsheets since I first started my business in addition to bookkeeping. But I was looking at a spreadsheet from 2016 last week because I was grabbing example numbers for the course I'm making for designers. Fun thing, you guys, I'm so excited for this course, but I was working on the lesson on how to confidently raise your prices. And I'm actually going to show the people in that course exactly what my prices were at for branding and website design in 2016. And then incrementally how by project that price was raised. It's really cool little table I have that I'm sharing there. But I was looking at this, right? And so as I was looking at it, I noticed that I often was spending less than $200 in operating costs each month during that season in 2016. Most of the time it was like around $200 to $150. Sometimes it was more like $400 in a month, but most of the time it was around $200, which feels so insane now because at this point in my business, I have like singular softwares that are $200 a month. Facebook ads and things like that, paying a team, all of it. But at one point that was like my operating costs, which is so amazing. And so now though, as I've transitioned to making more money and spending more money, there's more costs and more reason to have backup money. So I don't pay myself everything, right? So I hit a few months ago and I knew my revenue and business profits right off the top of my head, but I had no idea what I had paid myself to my personal finances year to date. And I was listening to Claire's podcast talking about this, and I was like, wow, I don't know how much I make though. She's talking about how she's not paying attention to revenue anymore. And just spoiler in her episode, her thing she's paying attention to now is how much money she pays herself. And I was like, wow, I don't even really know how much I pay myself, right? I know how much Elizabeth McCravy LLC makes, but now that I'm not paying myself every dime, that profit number is different from what Elizabeth McCravy and Adam Household makes from my business. And so it freaked me out, and I immediately fixed up my spreadsheet that I use for knowing my financial picture to do another tab that's like letting me see those numbers clearly of like, okay, here's how much I'm putting into my own personal finances every month. And with that, I want to touch on something real quick here. I'm going to do a whole episode on this, and I debated whether or not to like just incorporate this idea completely into this episode, but I think I'm going to keep it mostly separate, but I do want to touch on it here because it's relevant. But I'm really sick of what we call in the online space marketer's math. That's what I call it, what I've heard other people call it. And I want to tread lightly saying this because I don't think people mean harm here when they do this most of the time. So I'm not trying to hate on anyone's business or hate on running a big business that makes a lot of money. And again, I want to do a whole episode talking to this, but this stuff of marketing math can be really confusing and misleading to those of us listening to it when we think about our own business's finances. So when I say marketing math, I'm talking about things like when people say, I run a 7-figure business, I run a 6-figure business, I had a 30K launch, I make consistent 5K months, all of that stuff. There are so many questions that come up for me when I hear people say this that are clarifying questions that people don't share because they're trying to share vanity metric types numbers and being intentionally not specific. And again, most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, I know there are people out there who break down like their entire business's revenue and profits and things like that. And I think that's awesome. And for people who don't do that, there's probably legal and financial reasons that they're thinking not to, but those numbers are super vague. So like to kind of clarify what I mean, if someone says, I run a multiple 7-figure business, or I run a 7-figure business, right? We hear that in so many like podcast intros and from people who are selling online courses. You probably heard me say that about saying I run a 6-figure a year business. So I can fall into some of this as well. And I want to be with my own business really cautious to be as clear as possible when I share numbers like that. By the way, that's something I'm working on, of like making sure that I'm not doing misleading math when I talk about my numbers. But going back to the 7-figure thing, right? So someone says, I run a 7-figure business. My question would be, does that mean you've made $1 million over, say, the past 10 years you've had your business, right? That's what they could mean. They could mean cumulative revenue in the business over, 5 years, 10 years, however many years they've had the business. I know for a fact that some people say 7 figures or 6 figures, and they're talking about over the 3, 5 years, 10 years, whatever years they've been in their business, right? Which feels misleading to me. So please don't do that if you're doing that. People typically think that if you were to say that, you mean $1 million in revenue in 1 year. That's what I think most people mean. But even to go a little further, does that mean they made $1 million in revenue that year? Does that mean they made $1 million in profits after expenses? Does that mean they paid themselves $1 million, right? There's so many questions that come up. And when people say 6-figure business, the same thing occurs. Does that mean you made 6 figures in revenue or in profits, or that you paid yourself 6 figures? We don't know, right? Because people are not getting specific with it. And the thing I want to kind of say here is that I think what most people mean when they share those kind of numbers that are really vague is that they mean revenue per year in their business. So they would mean I've made $1 million in revenue in 1 year, not cumulative. But anyway, so having a 7-figure business though, or, put 6 figures in if that's like your big next goal, but to use 7 figures as an example, that does not mean that that person is personally depositing 83,000 something into their bank account every month. That's what it comes out to if you were to pay yourself $1 million a year, about 83,000, right? And so when people typically say that, what they're referring to is revenue in 1 year. Although I know, like I said, that some people are referring to over the course of their whole business, which I think is super misleading. So please don't do that. And again, I want to do a whole episode about marketing math because I have so many thoughts on this. But when you are looking at how much revenue, profits, and paying yourself, you have to pay ad costs, pay your contractors, pay your team. So many people do joint affiliate marketing now where they might have, a 6-figure launch, but half of that is going to affiliates, right? So the 7-figure business or 6-figure business, right, is very glamorized. And when I think about my own business, my goal is to eventually earn $1 million a year. That's what I'm working towards for sure. So not trying to hate on any of that. But I think so often we see the flashy number of 7-figure business and we see it for something else. We see it as wow, that person is personally paying themselves so much money. Or we see 6-figure and we think they're personally paying themselves over $10K a month when they might really not be, right? So the number though, the point I'm trying to make here, again, not trying to bash any of these numbers. Please do not hear me say that. Please, I hope you can hear my sincerity in sharing all this. But here's the big point I'm trying to make. The number that affects you the most as the business owner is your take-home pay. Right? Not the revenue. Revenue is in most cases a vanity metric. And for many of you, it's a number you'll never really share with people. The people sharing their revenue are people who are in the business of helping people make more money. And that's why they share the numbers, is to give credibility to why they can help you make more money, which makes total sense to me, right? But you might not be someone that ever shares that. So a question to consider when we say take home pay is the number that actually affects you, right? So would you rather make $700K in revenue with a team of say 6 to 8 people and really expensive Facebook ads and pay yourself $100K a year? Or would you rather make $225K in revenue and pay yourself $100K? And the $225K, maybe you have a really small team and really lean business. And the reason I do those two numbers against each other is because both are possible to pay yourself $100K a year after tax and everything. So you could absolutely do $225K in revenue, or even less than that actually, and still pay yourself post-tax $100,000 a year. I have personally done this. Okay. So I know it's a fact. I know it's doable. I have friends who have done this. And you can also make though a lot more money and run a bigger business and still only earn $100K a year, or only earn $200K, or whatever the number is that someone making less can do. So the point is, you do not need massive revenue numbers in order to pay yourself a good salary. But what you pay yourself is what actually affects you day in and day out. It's what affects your personal budget, where you live, what investments you can make in your business, how much you can charitably give. all of that is coming from what you pay yourself, not the revenue. Okay. So my call to you here is basically to find out what you've paid yourself year to date. This is airing, I believe, early October, maybe, or the end of September. And so, we have still months left in this year, but figure out year to date, okay, like what have you actually paid yourself after taxes? What's actually going into your personal finances, and find a way to track that number well going forward. And if you don't like the number, look at your business and see, like, are there ways I can increase this? Is there more money there that I could pay myself? What would I do with that money? Maybe you're like me and you're wanting to do investment properties. Maybe that's where you're putting the extra money, right? So finding out what is that number year to date that you paid yourself, and realizing maybe you don't need to make $1 million in a year to pay yourself that desired salary, right? And so fun thing real quick I want to add in here too, for those of you who are designers, you're interested in that course I'm coming out with, I already mentioned it once, and that's the project I'm working on the most right now in my business. So that's why it's on my mind a lot. But the amazing spreadsheet I use for tracking my finances will be included in the course alongside other trainings on finances, like exactly what credit cards I use, how to use that spreadsheet, thoughts on tithing and setting that up, all kinds of things on personal finance as well. Saving for retirement, so much. But that spreadsheet, I seriously am so obsessed with. I just recently refined it to make it make more sense for people who are not myself, because the one I've used over the past, like 4 or 5 years now, has gotten really messy. I keep duplicating it, so a new one every year, but it's gotten kind of messy. So I really worked on refining it, and that's going to be included in the course. And I also plan to eventually sell the spreadsheet for anyone who wants to buy it, just in my shop as like a small purchase. So just know that I've had so many requests for that after I mentioned it in an early podcast episode. I don't even remember what episode it was, but I mentioned it in there, and I said in the episode, if you would like this to be something I offer, please send me a DM on Instagram. And I get so many DMs about it all the time of like, when are you going to offer that? So just know that's something that's coming. But until then, you can find a way to figure out what you paid yourself year to date, even without that. So one thing I did whenever I, again, listened to Claire's podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know my revenue, I know my profits, what have I paid myself? I looked back through my bank account, and I looked at like all the basically pulling out of like large sums of money to my personal finances, because I can see the account numbers and all that happening. And I just put it in a spreadsheet and added it up. So that's how I did it for backlogging. Okay, so now let's move on to the second number. I have less to say about this one, but this one is equally important. It really goes hand in hand with knowing your take-home pay, and that's knowing your profits after tax. So we call this retained earnings in the business, right? And again, this is more of a number that you're going to care about when you start scaling, because you won't be paying yourself everything you make anymore. Or if right now you're already someone who is not paying yourself everything you make, this number will become greater and greater as you scale your business, because you're able to possibly keep more money in it or choose to pay yourself a lot more. So thinking about the finance numbers here, right? Kind of starting at where the money comes in to going to the ending of distributing it, we have revenue. Then we have profits, and that's what's left after spending. So it goes revenue, expenses, profits, and then there's tax on that profits that we pay the government, probably in quarterly taxes, and then you pay again at the end of the year. And then after that, you have your take-home pay. That's what you're paying yourself that we just talked about. And then after that is retained earnings. And retained earnings is what belongs to the business. And again, shamefully, this was something I was not tracking for a long time. And for a lot of this year, because again, the transition for me, I was at one point paying myself everything. So it wasn't really a number I was paying attention to, right? I was like not looking at it, but then all of a sudden I'm looking at my business account and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of money in here. And I've been paying myself a lot of money. Where does all this money need to go? Which of it's tax? Which of it's savings? All of that kind of stuff. It was kind of confusing. So now for me, just to kind of say where I'm at now and where I'd love to encourage you to get to, is that I can look at my business bank account and know what money for that month, generally speaking, not necessarily always exact dollars, because money is coming in and going out at so many different times throughout the month, but what's tax saving and what's retained earnings. And then you guys, you can use that retained earnings to pay yourself more money as well. And then also to save for things in your business. So when something like an opportunity for, like, let's say an online course that you're like, I know this will completely change my life, or a mastermind or some kind of group coaching program, when that comes up, you can have the money set aside to go ahead and pay yourself. So, again, to be transparent and kind of like, again, like I was saying, I want to be transparent with like the way I share about money and not, keeping a veil up, but to be transparent, I started salarying myself this year. And so not paying myself every penny. I kind of started doing that last year, but more truly like consistent numbers of salarying this year. And then I do a quarterly bonus. So I pay myself a set amount each month, and that number has stayed the same. I think if I'm remembering correctly, again, I could look back at my spreadsheet, but it's basically stayed the same all of 2020. And last year I was also kind of salarying myself, but it varied more. And so then every quarter I'll take some of that retained earnings and I will pay myself more as a bonus. And like I was saying in the intro, that money for a lot of this year has gone into things like saving for the rental properties we're wanting to do. So in the quarterly bonus, I'm paying myself a big sum there, and it's going straight into our savings for rental properties. Because again, it wasn't money we needed month to month, which is why it wasn't a part of the salary. So I've done that pretty consistently in the quarters. I will say last quarter, I waited way longer to pay, and I didn't really do a bonus. I did a bonus instead, just a little while ago. So it was delayed because my life was crazy and I wasn't really thinking about it. So I don't do it on like, here's a specific date or anything like that. I just do it when it makes sense. And the number for the bonus has varied a lot. And again, I want to reiterate, I said this in the intro, but I'm not an accountant. I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm not a financial advisor. These are just my own opinions and what's working for me. But that's the second number, is knowing what the business is getting post-tax, post-paying yourself, and post-paying everyone else. And this helps you with knowing how much you have to spend on things, right? Like I said, investing in courses, investing in a team, investing in, if you decided all of a sudden, like as you're scaling your business, you do want to start doing the Facebook ads thing, right? It's nice to have money set aside ready to do that. And I'm speaking to, I also want to throw in another caveat here. This is like the actual spot in my business I'm at right now. So I'm speaking to you as someone who's like in the thick of figuring all this out, which I think is really helpful. I love it when people share experiences as they're going through it. So I have a couple more thoughts I want to share. Just one more like closing thought on business finances that really could be its own episode, but maybe we'll do a full episode on this one as well, but I want to kind of summarize it here. In general, know how much you're making, profits, revenue, expenses, paying yourself, all of it, okay? And here's what I mean by this. It's all cute and fine when you don't own a business to tell people you're not good at math and to let your husband or partner or someone else handle your money. I know so many women who do this, okay? And when they don't own a business, let it slide, okay? You can just say you don't care about money, you don't pay attention to it, whatever. But when you step into a CEO role in your business, even if you consider yourself, I'm just a freelancer right now, even if that's where your headspace is around your business, that's fine. But being good with money is part of your job now. So do not run your business with blinders on. And I see so many women doing this and saying they're just not good at money. And it makes me really sad because that's part of your job as a business owner. And so that's why I want to go ahead and put this big point right here. You should know how much money you're making in your business and pay attention to it and be actively looking at where the money is going and how you can bring in more money, how you can keep more money, all of it. And so many women, and I really do mean women here because I don't know male business owners who do this. Men are way more likely to just want to look at their money all the time, I think, than women are. But a lot of women struggle with paying attention to their money. And sometimes it can look like a martyr type of thing where we say things like, I do it because I love it, not because of money, right? This is my craft. This is my art. I love it. I don't really care about the money. The money's not important to me. Or people say I'm just not a math person, right? So when you're running a business though, you don't get to be not a math person. Hear me say that again. If when you are running the business, you don't get to be not a math person. Math is part of your job as a CEO. And that's true even when you have a bookkeeper and even when you have an accountant, even when you have someone else who's like looking at the numbers with you. So like I have a bookkeeper who does work for me every single month in my business. I also have an accountant that I work with at the end of the year. And I still do the math for my business and I still know my numbers myself. And I would just really encourage you to do the same. And if you're someone who's so far in your business that's kind of fallen on that sword of like, money's not my thing, I don't care about it, I do it for the love of the art of what I'm doing, don't beat yourself up over me saying this. This is not to criticize or condemn or anything like that. But for your own sake and for the health of your business, you've got to look at the numbers and not be scared to look at the numbers. Make your finance time fun. For me, I look at my numbers more than just this time. I actually looked at them this morning on a Monday morning. But for me, once a week, and I do it on Wednesdays, I have what I call my finance time, where I get out my spreadsheet, I get out my bank accounts, I look at my credit cards, I'll look in QuickBooks, and I also look at our personal finances, and we'll update our personal finance budget. And I do that all at once. And when I finish that time, I've input like into my spreadsheet new sales and things of that nature. And I'm able to look and see, okay, right now, month to date, here's where I'm at. And it gives me so much peace of mind. And I do it once a week and sometimes twice a week because my template sale time, I make more sales in a week than I used to, basically. So I need to do it more often. But a key there to doing it often is not to get behind, because when you get behind, it feels really overwhelming and scary. But when you're doing this and checking in with your money once a week, it can feel more freeing. It can feel fun. And yeah, I think we're called to keep an eye on our finances, basically is what I'm trying to say. So don't be someone who says that you're not a math person. You can totally be a math person. And actually, I want to say something there with that. I'm not good at math. It's just a little thing. So I'm saying all this of how I pay attention to numbers. I'm not good at math. That's why spreadsheets exist. The spreadsheets do the math for me. All I have to do is know how to look at and analyze the numbers. But I've never been someone who's great at math. I'm someone who ended up in the arts, right? So like math's not my thing. And so it doesn't have to be your thing either for you to be able to know your numbers. So that was a rant there. But to sum up this whole episode, one, I want to say I hope this was so helpful to you to think about looking at your numbers in a different way and looking at how much you're paying yourself instead of just looking at your revenue. And I also hope this encourages you to, one, know those two numbers we said of retained earnings and owner's draw, what you're paying yourself, your take-home pay, however you want to call it. But also that you'll feel encouraged to focus on how you can grow those two numbers, right? Growing how much you pay yourself, growing how much you keep in your business for future investments and for security. You guys, when I look at how much I have in retained earnings in my business, it gives me so much peace of mind, because thinking about just recently, like I was talking in the intro of my dad passing away, if I needed to, which I really did, step back and do less during that time, maybe paying my team more because they're taking on more, I'm able to, because I know I have the money saved in order to do it. So it leads to so much more peace of mind. Again, I believe we're called to be stewards of the money we're given, and not turn a blind eye to it, but really pay attention to it. So I hope this encourages you to know those numbers, know how much you're paying yourself, know how much you're keeping in the business, and focus on how you can grow those numbers. Are there things you're spending money on that you don't need right now that you could cut? Is there ways that you could pay yourself more of that money you're leaving sitting in your business account? Maybe you don't need as big of an emergency fund, and maybe some of that money would be better put as like your nest egg investment for something like rental properties like we're doing. So anyway, I keep ranting at the end, but that's all I have, you guys. If this episode helped you, please let me know. I would love to hear from you of like where you were before this with your finances and some changes you're making. I think it's so fascinating talking about this stuff, and I wish more people would talk openly about it. So I hope that me sharing what's worked for me and what hasn't will help you as well. So yeah, share this episode with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook on social media to someone who you think it would benefit. And yeah, fun stuff, right? So let me know what you think, and I'll be back next week with another episode on a completely different topic. So fun, right? Okay, I'll talk to you then. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, friend. I appreciate you being here. Hey, I want to tell you, if you've enjoyed this episode, then I really want to encourage you to check out my website, where you'll find tons of resources to help you grow a profitable and sustainable business. Over on elizabethmccravy.com, you'll find a lot of great things, some of which I want to tell you about right now. So you'll find free workbooks to help you do things like identify your ideal client, discover what pain points you solve for your customers, or even a guide to help you plan out your Instagram feed. You'll also find my top business tools. Yes, I literally list out all the major tools I use in my business on my website, and I have a bunch of special discounts and offer for you guys to snag and try out these products and services. You'll also find my website template shop that helps you DIY your way to a strategic website for your business. These website templates are easy to use, they're built on the Showit platform, and they are gorgeously designed. I have a feeling you'll absolutely love them. So to access the tools and free downloads, go to elizabethmccravy.com/tools. And to access the amazing website templates so you can get started with a new website today, go to elizabethmccravy.com/shop. I hope you have so much fun exploring over there. There's so much great stuff for you on my website. And you guys, don't forget, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts so you never miss an episode. And leaving a rating and review for the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening, or even just sharing it with a friend is a great way to support this show. Thanks so much for being here. Bye, you guys.